Good evening and welcome to Open Sourcing Your Career with guest speaker Cynthia Rich. My name is Cara and I work within the community team here at eSynergy Solutions. eSynergy specialise in open source and cloud resourcing. If you're looking for a new opportunity, we can help you find the right role tailored to your skills and experience on either a contract or permanent basis. So if you are looking, please send over a copy of your updated CV. Should you be looking to build out your team, we can help you with hiring and attracting top talent. Alongside this, we can also help you with upskilling your existing employees around the latest open source and cloud technologies. So do get in touch. We're recording the session and the slides and recording will be made available and sent to you tomorrow by email along with my contact details. Now I'm going to pass over to Cynthia to begin. We hope you enjoy the talk.
Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session today on open sourcing your career. As mentioned, my name is Cynthia Rich, and I am one of the trainers here at GitHub. And just to make sure that we can all hear each other well, I'd like to just throw up a quick poll to make sure that you are able to hear my audio okay. So if you wouldn't mind, Cara and Adele are going to put that poll up for us. Just keep chatting here for a second to make sure that the audio levels are okay. Okay, wonderful. So it looks like most people can hear us. I have maybe one person that couldn't hear me at all, but I did pause talking there for a second. So I think we're probably safe to close that down. It looks like we're pretty good on our audio. So what I'd like to cover today is just very quickly, I'm not a big slide person, so I only have just a few slides, and then we'll get in here and have some fun and play around in GitHub. Contact information, if you need to get a hold of me after this session, you can certainly do so, or you could also do so through eSynergy as well. And my information is there on the screen, and I'll put that up there again at the end. And our objectives for today, what we'd like to accomplish, is we really want to talk about how you can maximize GitHub for your job search. So I know that the job search can be a very trying time, and what we want to do is help you prepare and help you to have a GitHub profile that showcases your unique talents and skills so that employers can find you easily. We're also going to talk a little bit about just general contributing to open source projects. I'm going to show you how to create a portfolio with GitHub Pages, as well as show you how to set up your very own GitHub resume. So with that, hopefully you all received the pre-course email that asked you to set up a github.com account. If you haven't already done so, please do log in. You can sign up very quickly. It's free to set up an account, and then you can participate in the activities with us today during class. If you have any questions as we go along, I'm actually going to show you a convenient way to ask questions in just a moment. If you have any problems in the next few minutes before I do that, there is the Q&A panel inside GoToWebinar that you can use to ask questions. But in just a moment, we're going to learn a better way to collaborate using GitHub itself. So with that, I'm going to switch out of my presentation. I promised you that part would be short and sweet. And I'm going to go ahead and sign into GitHub. So feel free to sign into your GitHub account as well at this time. And once you've signed into your GitHub account, the first thing that you're going to see is really it's your dashboard for your individual account. Now this is the view that you see when you log in. So if you come to my GitHub teacher page, you're going to see a slightly different page But this view that you see on my screen now is my GitHub teacher dashboard. And this tells me all of the activity that's occurred on this GitHub teacher account. It also shows me all of the repositories that I've contributed to, as well as the repositories that I own as GitHub teacher. The view that most people will see when they visit your GitHub account is your profile page. Now you can access your profile page by simply clicking on the drop-down arrow next to your user icon in the top right-hand side of the screen and click your profile. And when you do, this will pull up your profile. Now this is your face. This is your presentation to the world of who you are and what you do on GitHub. So it's really important that you maintain this page and pay attention to things like your avatar. You would be surprised how many people just use the generic GitHub avatar, which is interesting in how they calculate that in a whole different conversation, but not nearly as much fun as seeing what unique representation you would use for your own representation on the avatar on GitHub. So we like people to make sure that you've updated that information. Make sure that you put your contact information here so folks can get a hold of you if they're interested. But the important things here are when you look at your contributions, you're going to see your popular repositories. These are based on the repositories that you own that have the most stars. So the point here being these are repositories that other people have found that belong to you that they thought were interesting, and they bookmarked them essentially so that they could come back to them later. The repositories that you've contributed to is a list of all of the open source public projects that you have contributed to, as well as you'll notice that I have one listed here that is a private repository. So they can't see that information, they can't see what you've done on that repository, but they can see that it's in the list. You'll also notice that there's a repositories tab. The repositories tab will bring you to a list of all of the repositories that you're a part of. You can then search down through those to see which ones are public, which ones are private, which ones are forks, and then there's your public activity tab, which shows all of the things that you've done on public repositories. Now if I jump back to the contributions page, the contributions graph is really important because this is what shows how many contributions you've made on GitHub to open source projects. So this is your pull requests, your issues, the commits that you've made. It shows your streak, what's your longest streak, your total number of contributions in the last year. You can also see a breakdown of your contribution activity based on a period of a week, a month, a day, 3 days. So it just gives people a way to see how active you are in open source. So as a hiring manager, I might be looking for what type of activity do you have in open source, but I'm also very interested in what are the languages that you're working in on GitHub. So in order to find that information, I can click into one of your repositories, and generally, oops, sorry about that, clicked in the wrong place. Let me find one that actually has some content in it since we just created that one. It's not too interesting just yet. But you'll notice now if I go to this GitHub Teacher PM Cookbook, you'll see that I have this colored bar here. And this colored bar is what tells me the languages that are being used in this project. So this is an easy way for folks to come in and see what types of languages you're using. But it's also really important for you if you are doing a lot of, let's say, Ruby work, if you really want to be highlighted for your Ruby work, to make sure that you have repositories on GitHub that feature this. Because as you can see, now as a project manager, I can quickly click in here, or as a hiring manager, I can quickly click in here and see, you know, what this particular project that he created or she created uses CSS and HTML. And then maybe I can click on this and go look at the project myself to see the quality of your work. So this is just a great way to demonstrate those features of your work. So with that, I'm going to go back over to my GitHub teacher account, and I'm going to click into a repository. And one of the first things that I want to do is show you generally how do you contribute on GitHub? How do you do open source projects? And I'd like to ask just a couple of quick poll questions to make sure that I can get a sense for your experience with Git and GitHub. So if you wouldn't mind, we will launch a poll that asks you how long you've been using GitHub. And if I can get everybody to vote there, just let us know how long you've been using them, what type of experience you have. Okay, so it looks like we have a pretty good split between folks who have just a little bit of experience and folks that have a whole lot of experience. So this will be fun and interesting to make sure that we try to target content that's appropriate for you guys. And then just another quick question, we'll close out this poll, and then another quick question that I have for you is, how do you typically use Git? So just a really quick, what is Git and GitHub? For those of you who already know, bear with me for just a second while I go through this, but Git is a distributed version control system that allows you to maintain source control on your projects, on your code projects. GitHub is built on top of that version control program, and is what allows the collaboration within those projects. So what we're looking for is, when you use GitHub, there's a few different ways that you can do that. You can use the web interface, which is what we're showing you now. You can use a desktop application for those of you who prefer the graphical user interfaces, or a lot of folks like to use the command line. So I'm just curious, I'm going to throw up another poll question here. Just curious how you guys prefer to use your GitHub. So again, I can make sure that we are targeting this content well. So it looks like we have a good majority who prefer to use the command line tools, as well as some who use the website, and a few that aren't sure yet. So that's fine. Hopefully by the end of today we will have you sold one way or the other on which way to go. I think the safe thing for today is we'll use some combination of the website and the command line, and hopefully that will allow everyone then to see the process that you would use to contribute to a project on GitHub. So we'll go ahead and close that poll. And let's jump right in here. So what I'd like to do is quickly ask everyone, if you would, I have logged into my GitHub teacher repository. I've created a repository just for today's class for open source career. And I'm going to ask you guys, if you would, I want to add you as collaborators to this particular project. In order to do that, I'm going to use the GitHub API to just run a quick little script in the background to add everyone. So I have created an issue. It's issue number 1 here, and I will drop this link to the issue into the chat window also of GoToWebinar, so you can click on the link from the chat window of GoToWebinar, as well as just navigate to the issue then on your machine. And what I'd like to do is just ask everyone to quickly leave a comment here for me. And while you're doing that, the other thing I wanted to share with you is, if you have questions during today's class, what I'd really love for you to do is to open an issue in this repository so that we can collaborate on those answers as well. So please do, if you have questions, open an issue, and then what I'll ask you to do is to just use the labels feature here and go down and choose the option of question whenever you do create a question, so that way it'll bring it to my attention and I can make sure to answer it.
Hi Cynthia, I think a few of the attendees are not able to see the screen. it's showing the poll window. If you wouldn't mind just ensuring that that's closed.
Okay. Okay, so I show all of the polls are closed, and hopefully now at this point you should see the issues screen. If you're still having a problem with that, please do drop us another note in the Q&A window. So it looks like a good number of you.
Yeah, still showing.
So tell me what you see. You see only, let's see here. So I attempted to close the poll on my end, so possibly what happened was since you guys launched it, it didn't like it. So I'll show the results and then hide those. And is that better?
Much better.
Okay, perfect. Great. All right, so now, looks like I've got a lot of comments in here, so I'm going to go ahead and jump over. Give me just a second to add you all. Okay, so it's running the script in the background. It's going to add you all as collaborators to this repository so that we can all contribute together. So now if we refresh the screen, you can see that it's added everyone as a collaborator. So now in this particular example, if I wanted to add you all manually, I could have done so just by coming over to settings, which is how you would work. Typically in an open source project, you're not going to be added as a collaborator. So this is where maybe this is your project and you want to add somebody who's going to work on this with you. Usually with open source projects, you're going to use a slightly different workflow where you're going to fork the repository. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But for right now, what I want to do is just show you the really basic GitHub workflow. And so the really basic GitHub workflow then involves essentially creating a branch. What the branch does is a branch is typically you have a main line of work in your repository that is kind of your canonical code, and this is typically called your master branch. There's you can really call it anything you want to, but we usually call it by convention the master branch. When you create a branch, what you're doing is you're creating just a separate copy of your work so that you can experiment, try new things, fix bugs, and when you create that branch, it allows you to isolate your work from that code that you want to protect on the master branch. So when you do that, you're going to create your branch, we're going to make some commits, then we will create a pull request. The pull request is what tells others that we have something that we want to add to the project and asks them to take a look at it. So this is really that collaboration piece, if you will. From there, there'll be a discussion around your code. Once it's finalized, you would deploy the branch and then merge that in. So just for the fun of it, I want to go through and let's just do a really quick little project together, and I'm going to make sure I've got everybody added here as a collaborator one last time running through the script. And let's do this. So typically I would find an open source project and I would say, you know what, there's a problem, there's an issue in that open source project, and I want to help fix it. So let's just say, for example, my issue is let's add bios for all collaborators. Okay, So we're going to create bios for all of our collaborators. So now this is the part where you get to do something, and I want you to follow along with me with these steps. So the first thing that we're going to do, we have an issue to create a bio. Let's go up here to our code view. And now our code view is the main view of our repository. And you can see that I have this README file that's listed here. The README is a special file that GitHub will always render on below the file tree of your repository, but I want to add a new file. So I'm going to click this plus button that you see next to Open Source Career here, where it says Create a New File. I'll click that plus button. You please do the same. And I'm just going to create a file, and I'm going to call mine GitHub Teacher-bio.md. So replace GitHub Teacher with your username instead of GitHub Teacher. .md is for Markdown. We use Markdown everywhere on GitHub because it's a nice lightweight markup language that's pretty easy for people to pick up. So we find that even folks who don't code on a regular basis can pick up Markdown and contribute with us and collaborate with us in these repositories. So that's why we use Markdown pretty prolifically. You can use it in almost every text field on GitHub. So let's just add some content here. I'll use some examples of Markdown language. So that single hash sign there is just a heading level 1. I could do a heading level 2. If I wanted to, I could just do bold text with a double asterisk, but I'm going to do a heading 1. Okay, so just a couple of things about me, and then I'm going to now, once I've got some content in my file, I'm going to go down to the bottom here, and you'll see that I have this option that says Commit New File. So what does that mean? In Git, this is actually a Git thing, this is a version control thing, and what I'm saying is I want you to take a snapshot of this file at this point in time, and that's what allows me to, if I want to roll back to a previous version of a file, I can say go back to this previous snapshot. So that's the purpose of the commit. So I'm going to go ahead and commit my file now. And with your commit message, you want it to be somewhat descriptive. It's telling the history or the story of your project. So with the commit message, I should be able to read down through a list of all of the commits you've done on your project and understand the history and what's changed and why. So commit message, good commit messages are really important, and especially when you're thinking about other people looking at your open source contributions. This is a good thing to focus on. So in this case, I'm going to say created new bio and added the first 2 items. Now you'll notice here that at the bottom it says commit directly to the master branch. Well, we talked about that, and we don't really want to commit straight to our master branch, right? Instead, what we want to do is we actually want to commit to a different branch that isolates this work from master. So in this case, I haven't created a branch yet. I'm making just a very simple change. So I want to create a new branch for this commit. So I'm going to add a new branch here that's just called GitHub Teacher Bio, and I'm going to propose this new file. So do those same steps. So you want to just add some content, create a commit message, and then go down and click that button that will allow you to create a branch. Give your branch a unique name. You don't want to use GitHub Teacher Bio because then we'll be trying to use the same branch. But give yours a unique name like your user ID with bio. Now another interesting thing that I can do here is I can cross-reference, if I want to, between the issues and the pull requests that have already been made on GitHub. So in this case, I'm going to cross-reference that issue number 3, which is where we said, let's create a bio for all collaborators. So I can use the hash sign, you'll see that it pulls up a list for me. You can also do a fuzzy search here if you want to, but I'm just going to say I want to choose issue number 3. And then click Create Pull Request. So when we create the pull request, now you should see the conversation view, which is really just, this is where we have that discussion about the pull request. We'll come back to that in just a second. You should see also a commits view, which is all of the commits that have been made on this particular branch. And then you should also see a files changed view. Now within the files changed view, I can add line comments. So maybe I could come to this first line here, lives in North Carolina. And I can add a line comment, and you'll see that when I add this line comment, not only does it appear in the files changed view, but it also adds it then to the conversation view. So now I can see from the conversation view that there was a comment on the diff, and it shows it right there in the conversation. So let's go over here. Let me check on issues real quick, give everybody a chance to get caught up, make sure there's nothing that we need to address. Great. I see pull requests opening up. That's fantastic. I'll give everybody just a second here to get caught up and get your pull request opened. If you need any help, I'm going to just very quickly go through and show you the steps. So you're going to click on the plus sign to create a new file. You're going to give your file a name, add some content to it, and you'll come down to the bottom here, write your commit message, and then you want to make sure that you choose this option that says create a new branch for this commit. So if you commit directly to the master branch, you're going to skip that whole pull request process. So what happens when you commit to the master branch is it will not allow you to create a pull request, because a pull request is really a comparison between the two branches. It's a comparison between what's on master and what's on the branch that you created. So, all right. So we've got quite a few pull requests created here. Going to give you just a second to finish those up, and then we'll move on. I know that some folks like to do very detailed bios, but we'll do short ones for today because we only have just a little bit of time together. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go on. So now that I have created my bio, typically we would have a conversation. Maybe I would go back in and make some changes to my file. I could do that by just simply going to the Files Changed view and choosing the pencil icon over here to make some edits to this file. But for now, it's a simple bio. I think it has what I want in it. So I'm going to go ahead and merge my pull request. So to do that, I'll click Merge Pull Request. You'll see that it comes up with this message here. This is my merge message. This is what I'm doing. I'm merging one branch into the other, and in doing so, I'm adding a bio for GitHub Teacher. So the default description there is just fine. I will click Confirm Merge, and now when I do, you'll see that I have this message that says my pull request was successfully merged and closed, and that my branch can safely be deleted. So what happens when I merge is GitHub or Git takes that commit that I made on my branch, it essentially moves it to master, and which means that my branch now is no longer needed. It's just this useless artifact that was a pointer to some commits that are no longer unique to my branch. So I can delete that branch. The nice thing about GitHub, and for that matter, is pretty much to revert this changes. Bio. If I wanted to just quickly revert those, I could do that. I could also restore my branch. So there's always a way to undo just about anything that you've done. That's really quick at a high level, the workflow. How do I make changes to files on GitHub? So you're probably wondering, and I see that a lot of you have successfully merged your bios. Thank you. So you may be wondering, okay, well now I know how to make a change in GitHub. I know how to go through and do things, but how do I find good projects to work on? And what are some of the other things that I need to do to maximize this for my job search? So let's take a look at a couple of those. The first thing I'd like to show you is if you go to your profile and go down to settings. If you are looking for work, you'll notice that there is this available for hire button down here at the bottom. So you can choose that available for hire, which I'm not going to do because GitHub Teacher is not available for hire, but you can choose that and it'll save a jobs profile for you. There is a GitHub jobs board that will allow you to, it will connect here and allow you to see the jobs that are available. So that's one really good thing that you can do, but you probably want to find some things, some interesting projects to contribute to. You can do that a couple of ways. One of the ways that's really great is through this Explore feature. So through Explore, you can see a bunch of different featured projects. You can also see showcases, which are groupings of projects. So for example, some good examples of GitHub Pages, which I'm going to show you in just a moment, as well as trending repositories. So these are repositories that have gotten the most stars today. The neat thing about this is you can also choose the language. So let's say you are a Ruby person. You can choose Ruby and find trending repositories based on the language that you prefer to use, or maybe a language that you're working on building experience in, and go and look at those projects and possibly contribute to those. The other thing that you can do is you can star projects. By starring a project, you are creating a bookmark that just makes it easier to get back to later, and of course you're giving props to other people who have created great open source projects. So it's a good idea to go in and star some projects that you can go back to later. So that's how to find projects to work on. But one of the first things I usually recommend that folks do, especially if they're in the job market, is to create a Pages account for themselves. And when you do that, what GitHub Pages is GitHub Pages is a static website that is hosted directly from a GitHub repository. So in order to do this, it's really simple. We have some pretty basic setups that you can do very quickly, as well as you can get pretty fancy with these. You'll see some examples scrolling on my screen here of GitHub Pages sites. And then I have a few tabs open at the top here if you want to take a look at the go to webinar screen and take a look at some of the different examples. So this is a really basic blog about software. So you can do a blog. There is actually Jekyll, if you're familiar with Jekyll, that is a blog-aware static site generator that integrates very, very well with GitHub Pages. And I'll show you some examples of those as we go through here. Twitter, I love this site. They have an amazing, these are Twitter projects. Netflix also has an amazing site that showcases their different projects. So you can see here that they've really put some time into making this look amazing. I think this is an interesting example. This is an individual's portfolio that he's posted online. So he's a typographic, looks like, designer, and he's put some examples of his work here in this nice portfolio. And again, these are all GitHub Pages sites. This is one by a company called Development Seed. Just some really, again, nice integration here, and you can see that they list not only their projects, but also they have a blog, and they've linked to all of this from their GitHub Pages site. So a lot of these sites that you see are built using Jekyll. You can find more information about Jekyll at jekylLRB.com if you're interested. But the really nice thing about Jekyll is that we have this huge community of people who have spent time putting together these amazing themes. So with very little effort, you can integrate a Jekyll theme into your website and have something really impressive that you can send recruiters to look at your portfolio. So it's one thing to send them just to your GitHub profile page, and that's okay. But if you want to showcase yourself and differentiate yourself, this is a great way to do it. So GitHub Pages is how we do that. And what I'll do is I'm just going to very quickly show you how to set up a GitHub Pages account. So let me go over here to my repository. And I'm going to add a new repository. And when you create a GitHub Pages repository, it needs to have a special name. And what it's going to be named is it's going to be your username, so githubteacher.github.io. Now when you do this, you'll want to add just a small description. You'll want to make your site public and go ahead and initialize it with a README. This is what allows us to immediately create a clone of the repository if we want to our computer. And then we're going to just click Create Repository here. Oh, somebody beat me. All right. All right, give me just a second. I'm going to go. We're just going to delete their copy of this. All right. All right, so go ahead and create that repository. So you're going to have one under your user account, and it'll have your name.github.io. And now you'll come over here to Settings on the right-hand side. And when you scroll down here, you'll see that there's this GitHub Pages section in the middle on your settings, and it says your site is ready to be published at. It gives you the link. And you can then use this automatic page generator to create some content. So this is just a really quick way to get up and running. And you'll see that I can edit content directly here. You can also integrate Google Analytics here, so if you'd like to see what kind of traffic your site is generating, then you can certainly do that as well. And then I'm going to continue on to layouts. And now you'll see that we have just a few very basic layouts here. I'll just choose Dinky. You can see that I have, let's see here. There we go. We'll choose tactile because I had some text overrun there. So I'm just going to choose a basic format and click publish my page. And now you can see that my user page has been generated, and GitHub has done the work of generating the actual site content and information for me based on what I entered in that first screen. So from here, really the sky is the limit. You can continue to build on this and make your site better and better. You can also go visit your site. It gives you the link here for how to get to it. So you can simply click on that link, and there's the site you created. So really quick and easy. As you can see, we did it in just a couple of minutes, got a page up there that you can use to feature your work, to write a blog, let people know what you're thinking about, what's important to you, and blogs are a great way to show your expertise, contribute to the community, maybe add tips and tricks for how to use different languages better. So lots of different ways to market yourself as a professional and differentiate yourself using these GitHub pages. So I highly recommend that you work on creating a GitHub page. Another really nice thing that a lot of folks like to do is a lot of folks will build these integrations with GitHub, and one of the neat ones that we've run across here is this resume.github.io, and this is free. You can come to this website and you can generate your resume. So when I click, this is just a resume that was generated for Defunct, which is one of the co-founders of GitHub. And you can see here that it has information from his profile. You can see his personal website, the languages that he programs in, as well as some of his most popular repositories and things that he's generated. So this is really a neat way to build a resume for yourself, and you can see that there are quick ways now for recruiters to click through and see your actual website and what you want to portray about yourself. So it's a really, really great little project that someone worked on. So, all right. So one last thing I wanted to show you. We've talked about how to build a GitHub resume. We've talked about the very, very basic workflow on GitHub. We've also talked about some of the ways that you can find projects to contribute to on GitHub, as well as some of the features that you'll want to take advantage of during the job search. So the last thing I want to show you is that second workflow that I was telling you about a moment ago. So we talked about the fact that I was adding you all as collaborators. You could add a bio to the repository that we were working on because I added you as a collaborator. But what happens when you're working on an open source project and it's somebody that you don't know? So in that case, if the person doesn't know you, they may not want to add you as a collaborator until they've seen some of the quality of your work. So in that case, what we might do is we would set up a slightly different workflow where you would fork the repository, create your changes on the fork, and then submit those changes back to the main repository. So if you would come to this GitHub Teacher, GitHub Pages website, if you come to this repository, and on the top right-hand side, you're going to see the option to fork the repository. So you'll want to click that option. When you do, it's going to ask where they want you to fork the repository to. Now, since I'm signed in as GitHub Teacher, it knows that I can't fork the repository there, so it's going to ask me to choose a different account that I'm a member of. So I'm going to choose my GitHub School account. And so now it has created this fork of this repository. And you'll notice it's a little bit different because over here on the side, you notice that issues are not an option. But what it creates when it creates a fork is it makes an identical copy of the repository at that point in time and moves the whole thing over and creates a copy of it on your account. So if you are here at GitHub Teacher /GitHub Teacher GitHub IO bio and you click that fork button, I can see who's forked my repository simply by coming to members. So I'll go here to this one, which is the GitHub School, and you can see here that it was forked from GitHub Teacher. So you can quickly see that there's a relationship between these two repositories. So at this point, I own this repository. It's just like this was my own repository, and I can make any changes to this now that I'd like to make. So what I'm going to do, for those of you who like the command line, is let me just throw my command line window up here, and I'm going to cd into just a little scratch directory that I have here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to get a local copy of this repository on my computer so that I can work on it. So I'm going to click this clone URL down here on the bottom right, and then I'm going to pull up my command line window and I'm going to type git clone and paste in that URL. Now what it's done is it has created a copy of this repository locally on my machine, so at this point I could completely disconnect from the internet and continue to work on my website. So the next time you're going on a trip, you have nothing else to do, spend some time working on your website. I'm going to cd into I'm going to CD into my repository, and now I can make changes to it. So in this particular case, I'm going to open my repository in Atom. And if you're unfamiliar with Atom, Atom is an open source text editor. It's actually it is a GitHub sponsored project, but it is open source. So I'm just going to make a quick change here. All right, so just a quick change. I'm going to save that and close that out. Now for those of you who like the command line, I can say git status here. It'll show me that I have changes not staged for commit. If you are not familiar with the command line, this part may go a little fast for you, but they are recording it, so please make sure that you visit the recording if you have any questions. But essentially there's a two-stage commit process on the command line, so I'm going to use git add and the name of my file, which then, if I type git status again, shows me that I have changes that are ready to be committed. So it's an add step to put it into the staging area, which is where I kind of craft that snapshot of what I want my commit to look like. And then from there, I can type git commit. I can use -m, which says I'm going to put my message in line with my commit. So if I just leave off that -m, it's going to open my text editor and ask me to type my commit message. So I'm going to use git commit -m as a shortcut and just say cleaned up text on index. I'll press enter. Now it tells me that I have made some changes to this file, but at this point my changes only exist on my local computer, so the last thing I want to do is I want to take those changes and I want to push them back to the copy of this repository that I have on GitHub. So I'm just going to do a quick git push. And when I do my git push, you'll see that it's written those objects up to my file, and now my changes that I made are here. And you can also see that if you want to look just at the history of this particular file, then here are the changes that I made. So now you can see the changes that I made in this file just looking at this history. Now, I pushed directly to master just for the sake of time. Ordinarily, you would obviously want to create a branch and follow that workflow, but for the sake of time, I just wanted to have an opportunity to show you what happens next. So I push those changes. Those changes exist on my local computer, and they exist on my copy of the fork, but they do not exist on GitHub Teacher's copy of the fork. So in other words, I made a copy of it and I made some changes, but what happens if this is an open source project and I would like to send that open source project back to the original project owner and have them consider my contribution as integrating that into their project? Well, in order to do that, I would create a pull request. So I click on the pull request icon. I click on this blue button here that says New Pull Request. And you'll see now that I have some different options up here. I have this base fork and I have this head fork option. So the base fork is the repository that I forked from. So in this case, it would be that open source project. You choose the branch that you want to compare to. So in this case, I want to compare to the master branch of the open source project. And what I want them to compare is my copy of the project and my master branch. And you can see here quickly, these are the changes. This is what's different between GitHub Teacher's version and my version of the project. So now I'm going to click Create Pull Request. And then click Create Pull Request. Now when I do that, you'll see that I've been dropped back over to this main repository. I've been dropped back over to GitHub Teachers, githubteacher.github.io, repository, and my pull request has been created there. But your page, if you were doing this activity along with me, might look a little bit different. You probably see something at the bottom here that says that your pull request must be merged by a project owner. So in this case, I can open this file. I can look at the changes that have been proposed to me. Perfect, thank you. Looks great. I can look at the changes. In this case, changes look good. I'm going to go ahead and merge this pull request. And when I do, it'll show the file, it'll show the pull request has been merged here. It will also show those changes to me now. You can see, is it Raul Villa? Sorry if I'm butchering that, has made some changes to the site that are now reflected on my GitHub teacher main website. So let's go back to that website. We'll refresh that page. And it looks like the change you made was up here in my title bar, so you can't see that just yet. So with that, that's how you make contributions to open source projects. The flow is basically the same. You essentially just go through the same workflow. The real difference is that pull request process where you say that I want to compare my fork to the original fork so that the owners of that open source project can consider your contribution and merge that in. And the beautiful thing when you do that is that you will then have a nice contribution. It'll show in your public activity that you have done some work on this repository. It shows as a contribution for you, as well as shows here in your contribution activity on the front page. So it's all building up that story of how you work on open source. So with that, we've covered a lot of information, and I want to make sure I have answered any questions. So you will occasionally, I'm seeing a message in the Q&A window right now where it says we couldn't merge this pull request. So what happens is, because all of us were trying to merge our pull requests at the same time, GitHub runs a process every time master is changed, which essentially goes out, and let me just pull this one up to show you as an example. It essentially goes out and it runs a test, and it says, can I merge this cleanly without creating any conflicts? If it doesn't have time for that test to run between the time that somebody else committed and the time that the time that somebody else merged and the time that you tried to merge, it'll sometimes give you that message that says, we couldn't merge the pull request, please reload the page and try again. And that's all it is. It's just that test trying to get time to run before it actually merges in your pull request. So nothing to be alarmed about. It's a kind of unique situation that really only happens in training, but it's good to show. And then propose new file. So when you click the propose new file option, it should then allow you to create the pull request after that. So it's just one step prior to it. And let's see here, let me just check all of my places that we asked you to add questions and make sure we've got them all covered. And to answer the question, yes, the webinar is being recorded, and we'll get the recording out to you all, I'm sure, within a very short period of time. So if you have any other questions, please do go ahead, open an issue in the repository that we started with, that open source career repository. Please do feel free to add an issue there. We're also watching the Q&A window to make sure there's no questions coming in there. Let's see here. All right, so we'll give everybody just a few more minutes to answer questions. In the meantime, one thing that a lot of people like to see that I'll show you as you contemplate all of those great questions that you need to ask, one thing that happens a lot on GitHub is we tend to get a lot of email, especially when we're part of very active projects. And so I'd like to show you how to set up your notifications in GitHub to make sure that you're seeing and getting everything that you want, and then you can weed out those things that you don't. So there's a few different ways to control the notifications that you receive. In this particular case, you'll see, let's just say this particular issue is really noisy. A lot of folks commenting on it. Because I am watching this repository, which you will automatically be moved to that watching category when you're added as a collaborator to the repository. So in this case, I'm watching the repository, and because I'm watching it, I will receive a notification for every conversation that happens in the repository. But let's just say this particular issue, I don't need to watch this one. I can unsubscribe from this particular issue, in which case I won't receive any more notifications on this thread unless I'm specifically @mentioned. So unless somebody comes in here and says, GitHub teacher, what do you think, and @mentions me, I won't receive a notification for this thread for the next comment. So that's one way to tame the notifications that are coming in. Another one is to change your settings on the repository itself. So if you want to say, I only want to get a notification when I have participated in a comment or when I have been @mentioned, then you can choose the not watching option. Or if you never want to get another notification ever from this repository, then you can choose to ignore it. And then the last option is you can go to your settings page, to your notification center, and from this notification center, you can also choose whether you receive your notifications via email or on the web. So those are just a few ways that you can kind of clean up your email notifications that you're receiving, because they can sometimes become overwhelming. All right, so I'm not seeing any additional questions. Let me go back to the actual repository real quick. Make sure there's none there. And I thank you all for your attention and for your participation. I love seeing all the bios. I usually like to read these after class and comment, so if you get a note from me, just consider it my way of saying hi. Let me see if I have any other issues. All right, I will answer the TFS. The difference between TFS and GitHub, a little bit involved. I'll answer that one in this issue. I think it'll be easier to handle that way. Let's see here. Okay, so I will @mention you and write a response to you here just as soon as we hang up. So we are right at the end of our hour. And thank you everyone for attending. I hope you got some valuable information out of this webinar that will help you to open source your career, and I wish you the best of luck. If you have questions, I will throw my, let me just put my contact information back up here for you really quick. If you have any questions, my contact information is on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have GitHub-related questions, or perhaps wanted a link to one of the resources that I talked about today and went through very quickly. You'll also find that I put some resources in the actual README file of our repository that we used today for some helpful links that you may want to check after class. So again, thank you very much for your participation in the class. It was a lot of fun, and I wish you all the best of luck.